Welcome to another episode of Nantvar Brews. My name is Andy. I'm a homebrewer and beer lover based in Cardiff. And the name of this podcast, it's the name of the area that I live, but it's also a little Welsh phrase that means big stream or big brook. And I like to think of this podcast rather cheesily as a big stream of great people and lovely stories, all loosely linked to beer. And this is an episode that I wanted to do for a while because I often mention I'm a homebrewer, and I really think it's time I did an episode all about home brewing. And so I am with Jack Baber, he's actually the head of my local home brewing club. Well, he's frowning at the word head. He's kind of the guy who runs it at the moment. So me and Jack have been to some homebrew things together, and I'm now sitting in his garage, which is a great setup. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Anyway, I'm going to stop doing what I usually do and do a really long intro and just say, hi, Jack. How you doing?
Hi, yeah, very well, thank you. You okay?
I'm really good. So I'm pretty wowed by your setup. So we're in a suburban garage in Cardiff. What have you done with it here?
I've been brewing for a long time, so I've been trying to acquire an awful lot of stuff over time. So I've got lots of bits and pieces that don't all really fit together. But I've kind of eventually been slowly turning my garage into my brew space, along with some other junk still at the back of there that's not brewing related, but trying to squeeze as much brew stuff in here as I possibly can, really.
So we've got a bar, and that's got a Keezer kind of underneath it. It's quite clever, actually. So the if you imagine one of those chest freezers, then you've got that beneath the kind of level of the work surface. And then what is effectively the lid of the freezer has been painted black, I think, and turned into the bar area, and you've got taps above that. So just for people who might not know, just talk through what a Keezer is.
I bought a chest freezer off of Gumtree. It was like 20 quid maybe. It was a used one, obviously, but it seems to fit the purpose. It needs a little bit of adapting to be able to work properly. You've got to put a collar around it, which is just some 2x4 to raise the lid up a little bit so that you can actually get all the kegs in there with all the gubbins on top, because they've got the gas pipes and the pipes that take everything to the taps. But this basically just keep the kegs at a constant temperature, nice and cold, so that when the beer comes out, it's fresh.
I mean, it's the dream, basically. Jack's got a bar in his own garage, and you've got 3 taps, which kind of come out of the wall. And I'll make a little video of this because it's such a cool setup. That means, I think, that you've got 3 beers on tap at all times, but I think you've got one. Just talk me through, what do you like to have going through your taps?
I have 3 on go at one time, but the Keezer can hold 7 kegs, I think. So I normally use it for cold crashing a keg once I've brewed it, finish brewing, want it to clear, so I put it down and just keep it at the same constant temperature. So there's already a couple of spares there as soon as the ones I'm drinking kick, or if I want to change it around and have something different. So 3's nice, but it's always nice to have a bit more variation if you can. So yeah, I have about 7 kegs in there at any one time.
We've got the taps, we've got the bar, we've got the Keezer. Anything else we need to talk about on the drinking side of things?
So there's, I guess, the dispensing of it. I've got 2 gas cylinders down there. I've got a nitrogen tank, which is a new one for me. I haven't started using that yet, but I've got a stout on in the middle that I've got carbonated now. I've had a bit of a leak in the keg. It's been not keeping the pressure in there. I think I've solved that now, and it seems to be all right. So it's carbonated, and now I'm going to switch to serving that on nitrogen to get like a Guinnessy type look to it when you pour through nitrogen. And then I've got a carbon dioxide tank as well for sort of dispensing and making everything fizzy.
Yeah, I've got a carbon dioxide tank in my garage as well. It does scare some people. It's not as neatly put away as yours, and so you walk into my garage and there's this massive kind of tank that looks like it may be explosives. It's not explosives. I'll just make that very clear to anyone who's listening. What got you started with this? Because this is quite an advanced setup now. Yeah. What got you started? Tell me the story.
I was chatting with my missus about this earlier because I couldn't remember quite how long ago it was. So I've been doing it for quite a while.
I bet she can remember.
Yeah, she can, because it's not too dissimilar to when my first child came along. But it was about 11 or 12 years ago I started. One of my best mates moved to America well before that, but I was chatting to him and he was telling me that he was starting homebrew, and I didn't even know that was a thing until he started telling me about it and sparked my interest. First one I did was a stout kit from Wilco, but it's a really easy entryway into it because not a huge amount involved. You just need a plastic bucket, pour the can, rinse it around with a bit of water and throw some yeast on top and let it go. That's kind of how I started. First couple of batches were like that. It worked out fine. It was certainly drinkable. It wasn't great beer, but it was certainly drinkable. Did another one of those and thought, must be more to this. Just chatting to my mate in America how he did it, and starting to get involved in what podcasts are out there and blogs and different channels were around. So worked out how to do all grain when you kind of get the grain and mash it yourself, and then you kind of extract the liquid, which is basically what you're doing when you're getting that can and throwing water on top of it. But you kind of do it straight from the grain, extracting all of the sugars, and then boiling it yourself and adding the hops and all kinds of stuff. So just got more and more intricate as I got more experience, but that was how I started.
Yeah, I think it's a very similar story. If you speak to homebrewers about how they got started, your interest is piqued, whether it's by someone else doing it or you just thinking, blimey, I just paid a lot of money for a pint in a bar. I wonder, there must be a way to do this cheaper. I mean, I am, I often refer to myself as the tightest man in Britain. I am definitely motivated by value. But I think it's worth making this point that, especially these days, the value you are getting out of homebrew is quite incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if you do it on a ingredients only basis, it certainly is, as you can see from all the shiny bits of kit around here. If you were to count all of that up, I think it might be a different equation, and that's because I've enjoyed it. You don't have to use, or you don't need all of this stuff to make really good beer. People in the club make great beer from much, much more simple setups than I've got. If you were to just pay for the ingredients and use a bucket and kind of keep it in a nice cool environment that you don't need fridges and all of that kind of stuff, you can do it anywhere that's cool enough, then it does work out very reasonable, really, compared to I like going to drink craft beer as well. I certainly have a fridge full of it, and whenever I go out I search and see what I can find that's interesting and new and something different, and happy to pay for it when I kind of go to those places, but it is a lot cheaper at home. Yeah.
And it's just loads of fun, isn't it, right?
I think that's why I do it, more than the cost. I think that's maybe the cost thing was something to start with, but yeah, it is fun. I think that's why I do it. I've started to brew smaller batches because I really like the brewing process. It means I get to brew more often, because you can brew 40 pints at a time. It takes me ages to get through 40 pints, so it's great having that much beer on hand, especially when you've got people coming over and friends to drink with. But if it's just in my house and I'm try and have a couple a few times a week, and get through my kegs slowly. But if I brew a smaller amount, it means I can brew more often and get to brew more different styles and use more different ingredients as much as possible. That's the fun bit.
Like I said, I've got a simpler setup. I can definitely... I'm just thinking now, there's a few people who wouldn't want me to step inside here in case I get any ideas about buying new kit. But I could definitely see myself ending up like this. Look, I must say, we've joked about it. It's not an over-the-top setup at all. It's just very, very nicely done. You've clearly thought about it, and it's got all the things that you would want to go through the process from the very beginning to the very end. And I've found, having seen a few people's setups, that you often have one or the other. You might have people who've invested a lot of time and money making it really good for them to make good beer, or the other way, to serve it. But I haven't seen many where it's a kind of quite an equal setup. So I think that's to your credit. What I was just going to come back on is that idea of brewing in the 23 litre batches, which is the kind of standard batch size. And I remember when I first made those batches thinking, this is a lot of beer. Yes. And then the way I dealt with that was just by bottling it and giving it away to my friends. And the reaction was so positive. I mean, I think free beer tastes great, right? Always. And that's another thing that I've really found, I don't know if you found as well, is that it's a hobby that really your friends absolutely love because you give them great beer.
Yeah, I think it's always nice to share as well. I think it's great to bring people come over, barbecues or whatever, and it's great. I think to be able to pour it yourself is always a bit of a novelty as well. People like that. I
think a point we should make is that getting started bit, and you talked about going to Wilco and buying a set, which probably only cost you maybe 20 quid or something like that, maybe even less. Yeah, less. It is actually really easy to get started, isn't it, in homebrewing?
Yeah, you really don't need a lot of stuff at all, I don't think. Like if you go for the kits, it is a bucket, something to clean it with. Cleaning's really important. By the pack, it basically gives you everything that you need. It gives you the wort, or the wort, concentrated wort that you add water to. You then put the yeast on top. Might have to add some hops, some dry hops on top. Once you've cleaned everything and you've put all of that in there, you seal it up. I guess the only difficult part after that is what you're going to serve it in, and that can take up a bit more space, I guess, especially when you've got 23 litres, but it's really simple. You don't have to make it a complicated process at all. I reckon that's probably half an hour time, and then you leave it for a couple of weeks. Then there's a bit more time bottling, if that's what you're going through, but the actual process of brewing doesn't take very long at all.
When you make those first couple of brews and they are actually fine, you suddenly realise it's kind of hard not to make beer, where the process is so simple, right?
Yeah, I think so. So that what we just described is like sort of like the starter level out of a can. I think if you make beer from grain, which is what I do now, and what I think probably most home brewers do, it's more complicated, but it's not really complicated. And I think that my process is, I can talk you through a process if that would help. So I'll typically brew about 10 litres or 15 litres at a time. So I'll get my water ready. I've got an RO water system, which is another flash gadget that you do.
RO, talk me through RO. What does that mean?
Reverse osmosis. You can certainly brew with tap water. A lot of people brew great beers with tap water. But if you want to get more and more into the detail of it, you can start with RO water or reverse osmosis water, which basically strips out all of the minerals, basically strips back your water to as close to just H2O as possible, and then you can build up the water to match the profile of beer that you're brewing.
And this goes back to the days of when brews from different parts of the country that would naturally have a different water profile because they might be, chalk aquifer, or they might be different layers of land that it's going through. The beers would have different character. The classic is Burtonized. People talk about Burtonized water. Burton was a kind of hotbed of brewing because its water was kind of perfect for those ale styles, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a very sulfate-heavy water, so you kind of get the distinctive smell that comes off of the traditional British IPAs and that kind of bitter pale beer. The other end of things that you might see is like the German lagers. They were very, very soft water with very little minerals in there, and that's kind of suits that style, that kind of clean lager a lot more. So you can adjust water. You certainly don't have to, but as you get into homebrewing more, it's another fun thing to do. I get my water ready, and I normally put it in the kettle on a timer, so I can set it so in the morning it's nice and hot for me at the right temperature. And the night before, I'll also weigh out my grain, get the grain ready and put it in a basket. It's an all-in-one system I've got from Dark Farm. A big steel cylinder. It's got a few ports on it, but it's a big steel cylinder with a basket inside. And so when the water's hot enough, I put the basket that's full of grain inside there and let it soak for a bit, which is called mashing. Do it for an hour. I don't know. I don't always do it for an hour. I kind of do whatever works for me on the day that I'm brewing. Sometimes I'll do 20 minutes. Sometimes I'll leave it in there for 4 hours if I'm going out. It's just whatever works at the time. So I think trying to just make it work around your life is one of the best things I think I've worked out over time from brewing, because there's not rules. It will all make beer. And then pull the basket up, let all the grain that's in the basket drain out, rinse it through a couple of times just to wash it off, take the grain out, and then start boiling. There's a big heating element in the bottom of the cylinder. Get that boiling, and then add hops at various different times, different amount of hops, different types of hops gives you different flavours, different aromas. Once it's been boiling for, some people say an hour, some people say 90 minutes, cool it down as, well, I say as quickly as you can. That's another thing. Sometimes I cool it down as quickly as I can with a nice chilling coil, pushing cold water through the beer to chill it as close to 20-ish degrees as possible. Sometimes I'll just put the lid on and leave it overnight to cool down, and then it's done. So whatever works for my day and how I can make beer in the best way for me that time. And then I'll take the beer out of the stainless steel cylinder, put it in one of my fermenters, add some yeast, stick it in the fridge and leave it for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I know if you've not done the brewing process, you'll think, that sounds really complicated, but it's really not. It's a process where if you follow these simple rules, which actually are logical, then it's very hard not to make beer. And I love what you're saying about adjusting your process to make it fit your life, because I think that's one of the things that puts people off doing homebrewing is they think, well, I can't take a day off work to brew. But it is possible to fit it around life, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think you have to take a day off work to brew at all. You can, if you do the full grain method, I think you can, if you preheat your water and you get stuff ready the day before, break it up into a few little chunks. Maybe save the cleaning for another day. Don't do that. It's a nightmare if you save the cleaning.
It weld on.
It does weld on. Yeah, it's really sticky. But you can do, or leave it soak for a bit, and you can break it up into smaller chunks to make it more manageable, and do it in an hour and a half if you want. It's not too long to actually do the brewing, and then get on with your life and do some other stuff. Come back to it a bit later.
One of the reasons I love homebrewing is it takes enough of your brain power that you are thinking, but not so much that you're stressed out by it. So it therefore kind of distracts you in a wonderful way that hobbies do. They kind of take you away from the stresses and strains of life, but you're still engaged in something, you're still being creative, you're still learning, because every brew is different, right?
I don't think I've brewed the same beer twice. Not by design, it's just that I've always got different ingredients in the freezer or in the cupboard, and so yeah, it's always something different to think about, and there's a lot of clever software out there that can help you design recipes and think about things in different ways. So yeah, it is a really fun hobby, I think, because you can do it on a real simple basis, and I know I was describing it fairly complicatedly. I was trying to give you as much of showing off as many of the tools as I've got, but you can make it work really simply for you, or you can make it really, really complicated if you want to get into all the nuts and bolts of absolutely everything. And I think that's the best thing about those kind of hobbies, is you can take it as far or not as far as you want.
Yeah, and every time you change something, you find a new bit of kit, or you want to try a new process or a new ingredient, then you can kind of taste the difference, and that in itself is satisfying. Now, look, on every episode of the podcast, if the guest is happy to have a drink while we interview, that we do, and we're going to do that here, since you've got we'd be rude not to. We're sat in a garage that has its own 3-tap bar. So what are we drinking tonight, Jack?
This is a beer that I brewed for, so part of we're in the Homebrew Club, the Rebel Homebrew Club in South Wales. So we have a few sort of challenges, like we try and do within the group to do for brew for 3 or 4 months' time, and then we'll try and do it, bring a few bottles along to the next meetup and compare notes and see what we thought, see what went well, see what didn't, see how things turned out. So we did one a few months ago, probably March or April time, on British ingredients. A British beer as well. So this is homage to 5 Points Best, which is real nice. I was trying to decide what British beer I wanted it to go for, or something similar to, and we were in a local bottle shop, Pops and Hops, and seeing what they had on there, and I bought a few different ones and tried that one, and it was blown away by how tasty it was, and I thought I'd like to have something like that on tap. So that's what we're drinking, my homage to that at the moment.
So a classic English bitter, right?
Yeah, it is really. I think that's probably a little bit too bitter for me, but you learn, right? And so that's part of the thing. So I think I've probably put in a few too many hops at the start of this, but it's got a nice clean taste, and I'm pretty happy with it. So it went down well at the Homebrew Club as well. So
I'm sure it did. Well, look, let's give it a taste. Be rude not to. Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, that tastes lovely to me. This is the thing, I'm sat here drinking what is definitely pub quality. In fact, and I was saying this to my friend the other day, this sounds massively arrogant, but I think I sometimes brew better beer than I get in the pubs, because you don't know how well they've looked after it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I love pubs. I love pub beer as well, but particularly cask ale, which is much harder to do. I'm a real big fan of that when it's done well. But there is definitely some bad pub beer, or at least not as good as homebrew. When we go to a Homebrew Club meetup, some of the beers that we have there are absolutely fantastic, because people take care over them. They're not kind of doing it to a budget, typically. They're doing it to a style profile, and they might be adding stuff that they wouldn't be adding in a commercial example. So you get to try all sorts of really different, interesting flavours, and it's all really good quality as well. It's really fresh, it's well looked after, and yeah, so I obviously you get some bad beers, so something's gone wrong typically. Generally, when you make beer, it's pretty good, fresh. But if an infection got in or something like that, you might be able to taste that. But yeah, I think homebrew beer is very good quality as a rule.
Yeah, I think you mentioned forums earlier on, and when you're starting out, you invariably have a question, you think, and it's invariably in the middle of the night where you're suddenly like brewing, because often I do a lot of my brewing late night, so I unfortunately haven't turned my garage into the brewery yet, so I'm still brewing in the kitchen. So I'm kind of waiting for the kids to go to bed and the kitchen not to be needing to be used by the family anymore. So I kind of tend to kick off at about 9 p.m. and then, keep going till sometimes at about 1 a.m. to get a whole brew done. The classic thing I did on my first ever brew, and I thought I'd ruin the whole thing, is that I put the bittering hops in when I should have put the flavouring hops in, and the different state. Because if you put hops in earlier, this is where I'm going to hope I get my knowledge right. If you put hops in earlier in the boil, then that's more about the flavour profile, and later it's more about the aroma, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely what is generally the case. But different hops do different stuff, and depending on how long they're in for, depends on how much aroma you get versus how much flavour you get. So trial and error is usually the best way to do it. But yeah, I think that's the general rule of thumb. So
I'd got that the wrong way around, and I thought, oh, it's over. This is going to be all off and wrong, and I won't be able to drink it. And so, I dived straight onto the forums, and this is the point I've been trying to make in a very long-winded way, is that and I think it's on a particular American forum where there was these series of letters, which was, what was it? RHAHB, that I'd see at the end of so many posts. And I was looking up a lot of posts about things that, potentially gone wrong. And I was like, what is that? So I Googled it. And what it stands for is relax, have a homebrew. And that's the kind of vibe, is like, life's short, it's fine, everything's okay, you probably haven't messed up, and even if you have, doesn't matter, just relax, have a homebrew. And that's the vibe, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so friendly. I think the club vibe is brilliant. I love being part of a homebrew club. I think it's I wish that I did that earlier in my homebrew journey, because it's made my beer better, and it's a nice sociable group of people to hang around with, really knowledgeable people who've made the same errors loads and loads of times and are happy to talk about them. And yeah, the forums, I think one of my favourite ones is Brewlosophy. I don't know if you use that.
Yes, and is that the one where he does lots of experiments?
Yeah, exactly. So he'd brew the exact same beer, split it, might do one yeast in one and a different yeast in another, or he might do different water profiles and brew everything else exactly the same. Brew the same beer, and then they do a blind taste test at the end, so they can get a panel together, see what they taste like, and see if people can taste the difference, to see if that thing does actually make a difference, which I thought, I'm not a scientist, I'm a mathematician, but that kind of way inclined anyway. So I found that really interesting, and so I just kept reading that stuff and trying to actually see what made a difference. I always thought it was really good.
That's really interesting what you said about you've got a mathematician's background, or that's kind of your way into it, and why you find something like Brewlosophy interesting. I also love the Brewlosophy stuff, but I come at it from a slightly different viewpoint, because I love creativity, I love innovation, it's part of what I do for my career, and I've always loved creating stuff, producing stuff, both artistically and in the media and things like that. And I love that part of the process. The problem-solving bit of beer is brilliant. And I can look around here, how do I fit a bar and all the brewing equipment that I need in a garage? And you've done it brilliantly, but this setup is totally unique, right? And it's totally unique to the space, so you've had to problem solve to do it.
Yeah, definitely, because there's as I said, I've acquired lots of bits and pieces over the 12 years or so. So we've kind of just I've got a spare fridge here that's got holes in the front of it that used to be my kegerator before I built a Keezer. And so you kind of acquire all of this stuff. And so trying to fit it all in the space is a bit of a challenge. But yeah, I think it's really interesting to be able to get right under the skin of the science and the chemistry behind what drives all of these different flavours and mouthfeels. So there's so many different angles that you can take. You need the science to be able to get the beer working, but you need the creativity to make it interesting and tasty. That
problem-solving thing, again, I remember you mentioned it earlier. You say sometimes you will put a chiller in to chill your wort down to pitching. I'm throwing in some phrases now. Pitching temperature. So, that's the temperature at which the yeast will be at the right conditions for it to thrive and start producing the alcohol in the beer. That I found that part of the process, especially since I was brewing late night, that was just when I was starting to get tired of thinking, I've got to wait for this to chill for, half an hour, an hour, or depends, or am I going to spend lots of money on proper chilling equipment? And I remember just reading about, in Australia, they're so limited in the amount of water they can use, because water is very precious around there, that they have no option. They can't use that amount of water, so they just stick it in a plastic cube, leave it outside, all sealed up, obviously, and it just naturally cools eventually. In Australia, it can take a while because it's quite a warm country. And I thought, I'll do that. And I have noticed absolutely no, if anything, an improvement in quality of my beer.
I've read those kind of things as well. I think they call it no chill as a method. Some of them lob them in their swimming pools, I think, to try and cool them down. Find any ways to get them cool that they don't be wasting water, because, like you say, it's so precious. So a lot of clever ideas out there on how to use the equipment that you've got, for sure.
Well, I always say brewing is about two things. First is cleaning. Brewing is cleaning, which I hadn't really realised until I did it. But the second thing is brewing is all about happy mistakes and happy accidents. So tell me about some things that have gone wrong.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It is definitely cleaning. There's a lot and lots of cleaning involved. I've definitely had my fair share of bad batches. I think one of the very early lessons I learned was Camden tablets. I think I've bought one pack in my brewing career, and it's lasted me the whole time. They go on forever. You don't need a lot of them, but they take the chlorine out of water, which all tap water's got. But you don't need to do water treatment other than treat it with Camden if you are doing that, because that gets rid of all the chlorine, which makes beer taste bad. So the first few times I did a full all grain batch, and I was using that water that hadn't been boiled, it had a really horrible taste. I think they describe it as like plastery smell or TCPE type flavours, which is, it almost put me off doing it because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, just following the process. But as soon as you realise something so simple can sort that out, that was definitely a big step and kind of made me realise actually it is simple. You just need to do bits like that in place.
I had a sour stout once where obviously a yeast infection had started taking effect. I don't think it had completely gone wild because it was just like a slight sour tang. Because, like I said, I always give a lot of my beer away to my mates. I thought, yeah, they won't want this. And then, one of my mates who likes to try everything, he's like, well, at least let me try it. And he was like, it's not too bad. And then the next day he sent me an article about how sour stouts are the new most in thing.
Yeah, always good to experiment, isn't it? You never know what you're going to come up with. I was trying to think of any other ones. I just remembered one that I'm sure my missus does remember. When I used to bottle, when you bottle beer, to make it fizzy, you kind of add some sugar into the bottom of the bottle and then put the beer on top of it, and it kind of just creates a little bit more carbon dioxide in the bottle and makes it fizzy and seals. There's a phrase called a bottle bomb. I've had one big one, and it kind of went all over my downstairs toilet where I was keeping the beers at the time. One went, and then as soon as one went, I kind of took them all outside and opened them all up, and they all started fizzing and going everywhere. It was in the middle of the night, but yeah, that was a pretty dangerous one.
Did it wake you up with the sound of it exploding?
It didn't wake me up, it woke Danielle up. She didn't know what it was at the time. Then we went downstairs in the morning and there's a sticky floor everywhere.
I'm a bit worried because I think I bought a couple of bottles along to kind of be part of the conversation and maybe to make a video with later, and one of them is this little one which I'll just describe. I keep these little glass bottles which...
I really like them.
Yeah, it's a little transparent glass bottle. I think there was probably like a fancy kind of mixer in or something, and I saved the bottle. Now, usually you're supposed to keep your homebrew in a brown bottle because then if it is in the sun, it's not going to do as much damage. But I really like to put at least a little bit of each batch in a clear bottle so I can kind of see what's going on. Yeah. And you talking about bottle bombs, I have a bit of a fear with this one that I only let it ferment for a week because I'm kind of on a deadline to get it ready for my mate's birthday. And then I suddenly had a bit of a panic and I was looking up, and yeah, it's rare that fermentation is completely finished within a week. So I may have some residual sugars in there. What am I looking out for to make sure that doesn't go? Do the tops bulge with bottle bombs or not?
Not really. As well as having a clear bottle, one of the tips that I learned, and to be fair, I learned it before then, I just didn't do it, but it's made me do it when I did bottle, is to do one in a plastic bottle as well. And then you can kind of feel how carbonated it is, and you can start to see the plastic warping if it gets too much. So if you put one in a lovely glass bottle, clear, so you can see how it's progressing, and if you put one in a plastic bottle that you can give a squeeze, that's always a helpful tip for that.
That is great advice, and I've actually got a couple of plastic bottles because I think it might even been one of your ones. It was in the Advent Challenge, which regular listeners I've mentioned quite a lot, which was part of this brew club that both me and Jack are part of, was this Advent Challenge where 12 of us or more actually brewed enough to give everyone a bottle, and then you ended up with 12 or 13 bottles of different brews. A lot of them were quite strong, weren't they?
Yeah, it was a mix. It was definitely a mix, but it's a Christmassy thing, and I think people try and pull out all the stops at Christmas and try and brew something a bit more special than they would do normally. I certainly don't tend to brew too strong beers normally because you get so much of it in a keg. I've got to get through it, so I don't tend to brew very punchy beers as a rule, but when it's Christmas you feel like you want to brew something a little bit special, and it's nice to be able to share something like that. So yeah, I think a few people took that approach.
Anyway, I've got a plastic bottle thanks to that, so I will do that. And this you're seeing in action the sense of community that there is amongst brewers, and that you're always learning from each other, right?
Yeah, definitely. The meetups are great. There's people even more nerdier than me that are into it. I won't name any names, but they're certainly they go.
I think I know who you mean.
Yeah, but it's great because you're really interested in those kind of things, and you can learn bits of information from them. People have got different bits of kit that have kind of tried different methods of doing things. One of the ones, a few years ago, one of the guys, I think he was brewing a beer for a competition. He brought it in and it was delicious. It was like quite a thick stout, really, really nice. And we're like, oh, so how did you get so much flavour inside? Before you do that, what do you reckon the ABV is on it? And it was something like 1.8%. It was really, really low, and you never would have guessed. And he was talking us through a method that he found online, which is non-enzymatic mashing or cold mashing. So you kind of of, rather than what I said earlier, which is where you put the grain in the hot water, put it in cold water for a very long time, and that extracts a lot of the flavours, but it doesn't get much of the sugars out of it. So when you add the yeast, it doesn't have as much sugar to convert into alcohol. Still got all of that body and all of that flavour. And it was incredible, him talking us through. Everybody was just sat there like that can't be with that level. That can't be that ABV, because it was so tasty. And so the mouthfeel in particular was just striking. And it was really good. Just having conversations like that just stick with you and give you ideas on what you can do in your brewery.
Because there are things that homebrew can do that the big brewers can't.
Yeah, definitely. I think particularly from an economic point of view, we get to try lots of different malts, specialty malts, and use them in stupid quantities that they would never use in a commercial example, because they wouldn't be able to. They'd have to charge even more, and it just wouldn't work. So there's a lot of ingredients that we can use. I've done another fun thing to try, which is reverse distilling, which is freezing beer and then scraping the ice off of it.
Wow.
So make it stronger. It was fun, and it's something different, another technique to try. And yeah, those kind of things you can kind of make work with what you've got. You don't need to go and invest in tons and tons of kit to be able to do it. You can just mend and make do type stuff. So
for people who might be inspired by this podcast to get going, you talked about the Wilco kit. Would you recommend certain books, or would you recommend certain podcasts or YouTube stuff? And do you shop for your equipment online, or do you go to shops? Like, what have you found has worked for you? So
I get pretty much everything online. There's some really great websites out there that serve the UK. Like the Malt Miller is really, really good. The guys up in Cross My Loof, excellent as well. They happily talk to you about the process. They've got loads of information on their websites, certainly sort of like starter guides. You can use their resources, but there's so much online. I think chatting to people who do it is, I'm aware that when I was talking through it earlier, it can sound complicated. I think that when you actually speak to somebody and almost follow them along, see what they're doing, that's the easiest way to get into it, I think, and speak to somebody who's done it. They can guide you through it. I'm sure they wouldn't mind coming over and giving you a hand. It's like I said, everybody's in it because it's a friendly thing to do, so just speak to people. I think going to a club meet is a brilliant way to start, because you get loads of people that would be willing to help out and talk to you about the process. You certainly don't have to go there as an experienced homebrewer. Definitely had some people that haven't brewed before, have only brewed once before, and said, I don't know that this is any good. Can you give me your opinion on it and describe what they did? And people give them advice and tell them what they could do differently. That's a great way to do it. I think the homebrew clubs are brilliant for that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember the first times that I came along to Rebel Homebrewers and quickly picking up that there were some serious brewers in there, and then having the guts to first bring along one of my beers, and actually for, those kind of wise old heads in the group to go, that's really not bad. It gave me such a confidence boost.
I think it's just nice to get people along, them to tell you what they're doing. You don't need to have lots of experience. It's just a nice friendly thing to do, and people will talk to you about your process. They'll talk to you about your ingredients. They like to hear the story about beer, because that's kind of why they're there. So they give you their insight, they give you their experiences. A great way to pick up the process and understand it more.
Right, so homebrewing is not just about beer. You can make cider too. So I bought a cider with me. These are the apples from my tree, and I make the most simple cider out there. I presume you have some glasses and a bottle opener in here.
I'm sure I do.
Let's have a little go on that. And I think this is part of the vibe as well, is you just make do with what you've got. So this is a selection of apples from our tree, and then the mother-in-law's tree, and it's just the simplest process you could possibly get. It's apple juice, it's cider yeast, and you just leave it. So there you go. Let's see what you think of that.
It looks nice and clear.
It's quite dry, but I like that.
It's very refreshing. It's really light and refreshing. It's lovely.
Yeah, so I have no idea how strong that is. My process for finding out how strong that is I've got a friend of mine who loves cider. I give him 2 bottles. Well, actually, I give him 3 bottles. He drinks them all in one evening and tells me the next day how strong it is.
That's a good way.
And usually the messages go, it's not strong this year. I think it's probably about 3-4%. And then a couple of hours later, he's like, yeah, maybe it's 6 or 7 as it kicks in. I didn't want to come empty-handed, but also I think there's something important about just have a go with what you've got, right?
Yeah, I think so. It does. It's really not complicated, and you can make it work in so many ways. And like I said, you can make so many different beers from so many different ingredients, but it can be super simple. I think just giving it a go and sharing it with people, getting their thoughts and enjoying it. It's it's a hobby. It's supposed to be a fun thing to do, right? So yeah, I think it's just give it a go, get involved, see if it works. If it doesn't, you said relax and have a homebrew. It doesn't matter. Just move on and do the next one.
Yeah, and it's very hard to make. You have to actually make some pretty big clanging mistakes to make beer that is not drinkable, and that's another thing. Is I think you have the confidence to know that it's not going to do you any damage. Any beer that would do you any damage will be so unapproachable that you wouldn't even want to kind of touch it, really.
Yeah, the smell would be usually enough. I think if you keep stuff clean, like you said earlier, cleaning is a big part of it, and as long as you keep stuff clean, you will make beer.
Another really fun part of learning to brew is you can look up recipes that are, you mentioned the word clone earlier, but they're copies or close approximations or simplifications of beers that you can buy in the pub or in the supermarket, and that's great fun. And I think a rule of thumb is that the darker the beer, the kind of easier it is to brew. I think lagers start to get a bit technical, and you might need to brew at lower temperatures and all that kind of stuff. But if you pick something like, I don't know, a London Pride or something like that, you can get really quite close to that with just a kit you can buy off the internet.
Yeah, definitely. And even more interesting, London Pride's a lovely beer. I'm a big fan of it. But you can get like some more modern breweries. A lot of them will happily share their recipes. I think the Malt Miller works with a couple of the breweries and has got their exact recipes. I don't think they mind giving it away as a rule, because it's not just about the recipe. It's obviously a big part of it, but the process and the kit that you're using, the water that you use, there's lots of different variables in there. So a lot of them, they started off as homebrewers, so they're in this community vibe as well, and they're quite happy to share a lot of the recipes. And there's a lot of people who have come up with their versions of a particular beer they've been working on for ages to try and change this and change that, and on their system, a lot of the brewing software that you can get, so I use a Brewfather software. They have an online platform where you can input ingredients and design all of the beers, or they've got a database of other beers that people have uploaded, and you can search on there for clones or different styles and varieties, and you can just take their recipes and plug them into your world and give them a go. So there's lots of resources out there to create the different flavors.
Yeah, and I think now that there's a culture of the kind of taproom culture which is coming in, the whole craft beer scene is, I know sometimes it can feel a bit pretentious and trendy, but actually if you go to, we're lucky in Cardiff, we've got Pop and Hops. If you go in there and chat to any of the people behind the bar or anyone in there really, and thinking, well, I'd quite like to get into homebrewing, they'd put you straight in touch. They'd probably put you straight in touch with you, actually, wouldn't they, or the local homebrew club, and then you're away.
Yeah, I think so. I'm sure most areas of the UK have got a homebrew, and probably wider world. Certainly, like I said, in America is massive, but in the UK there's a lot of local homebrew clubs. You'll definitely find a group not too far away from you, because there's a lot of brewers around.
Brilliant. Well, Jack, thank you so much for welcoming me to your garage and this incredible brew setup. And yeah, I just think that encouragement to go out there, have a go. If you have done a bit of homebrewing, get back into it and just brew more. And if you're thinking about starting, it's not as hard as you think. It's been a fantastic chat. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
It's Andy here. I'm sat in my little office in my garden. You might be able to hear the rain hammering down outside. And first of all, I just want to say thank you to Jack for letting me have a look around his little brewery setup in his garage. It's a great setup, and really inspiring if you're someone who's a little bit further back down the route of learning how to do that really top level stuff, to see what's possible if you just put in a bit of time and effort and think carefully about how you want things and be quite creative. He's got such a great setup, and it's definitely one I would like to emulate in the future. First of all, I'm really annoyed and sorry and frustrated that it's been a few weeks late getting this episode out. I'm struggling at the moment to keep up with the once a month podcast structure of Nat Val Brews, but I really want to continue to do it because I do love making this podcast. It's just about finding the time. Now, the good news is that I have found time to brew. So I have brewed a red ale. It's not my usual red ale. It's a slightly different one. The Malt Miller are doing a range of beers at the moment called, I think, the Basics or the Classics or the Essentials or something like that. It's basically like their Tesco value range of brews. And as you heard me mentioned in the podcast, I do like a bit of value. So I'm just interested to try out these kits because everyone's different. As I learned from Jack, he likes to brew in smaller batches, brew more often, experiment. I just really like the process, but I love the sharing part with my friends. It's really nice to make decent quality beer and just be able to give it to people for free. It puts a smile on their face, puts a smile on my face. So I quite like brewing in those bigger batches, and I'm interested to see. I quite like the challenge of how good can I get this beer whilst not paying that much money. So I've tried this new version of the classic red ale recipe that I used to brew one that was based on an elusive brewing beer called Level Up. It's very nice, always got good reviews from my friends, so I've brewed that a few times. So this time I thought I'd try a different red ale recipe. It's gone quite dark, and but initial tasting is it's good, but I did make a mistake. As I mentioned in the podcast, I didn't let it ferment out properly. So now I'm learning a new skill of decarbonating kegs and decarbonating bottles to get over that slight wrinkle. But there's always ways around it, and you're always learning something new. I'm really happy to have brewed again. The reason to brew for that is I'm finally making good on a promise. I get so many nice comments about the theme music to this podcast, and that was done by my friend Simon Oakes. And I recorded an interview with Simon for the podcast. I think it's called Beer, Music, Geography and Cholera, which was all the weird and wonderful places where our conversation went. So you can listen back to that. Just go onto your podcast player of choice and search through the old Nat Vile Brews episode. Look for the Simon Oakes episode. My payment for him doing that music, not that he wanted any, but I offered, was to brew him a beer. And then for various reasons, we could never quite get it done, or the right recipe, or the right strength. Anyway, this red ale is going to be served at his birthday party that's coming up soon. So I've done a little 9-litre keg, which will do about 16, 17 pints. And we'll have that on tap at his birthday, which should go down a treat. So I've got to get it right, and I'm having to decarbonate an overcarbonated keg. Anyway, that's part of the fun, problem solving, and I've enjoyed it. So, look, hopefully there's some good episodes coming up. Jack has got some contacts of people, breweries that I've been wanting to tick off my list that are nearby. So there's Weird Dad in Newport, somewhere I've wanted to go for a long time. They brew their own beer. They've got a tap room there as well, which is fantastic. Great reputation. Love to hear the story behind that. So, yeah, there's people I want to catch up with, and I will continue to try and make these episodes once a month, or as close as I possibly can. One of our most popular episodes, in fact I think it's our second most popular episode, is How to Save a Pub, and it was all about the Miners' Arms in Nenthead. That's another one you can listen back to. I spoke to a woman called Laura Seaton, who was one of the organising committee members for trying to save the Miners' Arms in Nenthead. They had their share issue recently. I put some posts on X, Twitter, saying that I was buying some shares. I actually bought 2 batches of shares in the end to help them get to their target. I was one of many hundreds of people that did it. Anyway, the great news is they reached their target, so they are a really significant step closer to saving that pub, and I thought you guys would be interested to know that. If you Google Miners' Arms, Nenthead, Save the Pub, I'm sure you'll find it, and they post regular updates. They're all over the social media. They're very good at that stuff, so you can find out what's going on. So we are one step closer to that dream of doing an Nat Vile Brews podcast episode at the Miners' Arms in Nenthead once it is all reopened and fully functioning. And I think that's it. I have waffled on a lot at the end of this episode, but I had a lot to say. So there you go. Thanks for sticking with me. We will be back soon, hopefully in about a month's time, with another interview and another just nice chat about beer with someone who is loosely linked to beer. But until then, the usual sign-off, which is until the next time we make a podcast, have a great life, be kind to each other, drink lots of wonderful beer, and I'll see you next time.